This took place a couple of years ago. I drive trucks long distance. I've been doing this for quite a while now, so I've grown accustomed to the endless stretches of nothing. On this particular night, I was on my second to last run of a statewide loop, just trying to finish up so I could finally head home. The route had me traveling across one of those desert highways that almost never sees any traffic after dark. No towns nearby, no gas stations around, and hardly any lights at all. Just a narrow two-lane road cutting straight through the desert beneath a sky full of stars. It's the type of drive that makes you feel like you're the only person still alive on Earth. I was about an hour away from my next delivery when I first spotted it. I glanced in my side mirror and noticed a dark SUV trailing me, which was a little unexpected. It wasn't tailgating or being aggressive in any way. It actually stayed at a comfortable distance, but it was absolutely following me. No matter how much I sped up or slowed down, it matched my pace perfectly. For close to 30 minutes, it stayed visible in my mirror, always there, always keeping that exact same distance. The driver never once attempted to pass, just sat back like they were waiting for the right moment. At first, I figured it might be someone too nervous to pass a big rig. Maybe they thought it was unsafe or against the law. But I ruled that out after going through several clearly marked passing zones. I guess it was possible they didn't know the rules of the road, but honestly, that didn't make much sense. As much as I wanted to figure out what was going on, I had deliveries to make. I couldn't waste my whole night worrying about whoever was behind me. So I tried to push it out of my mind. But the more I drove, the more I caught myself checking my mirrors anyway. It was really starting to get under my skin, which almost never happens. Around 1:15 a.m., I chose to pull over at a small roadside rest stop. It wasn't a full-service truck stop, just a dirt lot with a few faded spots and a little shack with vending machines. There weren't any lights in the area except one dim bulb flickering above the machines. I figured I'd step out, stretch my legs, maybe grab a soda, and more importantly, let the car behind me keep going. But when I looked back before shutting the engine off, I saw the SUV pull into the lot too, parking in the farthest corner. At that moment, whatever uneasiness I felt turned into outright anger. Whoever was driving that SUV was about to get an earful. I climbed down from the cab and stormed across the lot toward the vehicle, not bothering to hide my frustration. But before I could even get close, the SUV roared to life and tore out of the spot like they were escaping a crime scene, kicking up dirt and gravel everywhere. As it sped by, I tried to catch a look at the driver, but the windows were tinted too dark to see through. I stood there watching as the SUV screeched back onto the highway. Within seconds, it was gone. Just the faint glow of taillights shrinking into the distance. Part of me was glad it was over. I could get back to my night without worrying about it. But another part of me was deeply disturbed. It was obvious that whoever was behind the wheel had been following me for a reason. And worse, they clearly didn't want me approaching them. That meant their intentions weren't good. As I walked back from the vending machines, which were completely empty, so the stop had been pointless, I realized how drained I felt. My energy was gone, and I wasn't eager to get back on the road. I decided I had earned a short break after everything. Just a quick nap, maybe an hour or two, before finishing the route at sunrise. I walked a full circle around my rig, double-checked the locks on the cargo doors, and made sure everything was secure. Then I climbed back into the cab, leaned the seat back, cracked the window for air, and tried to rest. The lot was dead silent now, and for the first time that night, I felt like I could relax. My thinking was, even if the driver wanted to cause me harm, they wouldn't turn around and drive back just to keep bothering me. And even if they tried, finding the same dirt lot in the middle of a dark desert would be nearly impossible. Between my exhaustion and the sudden comfort, I drifted off quickly. If I had to guess, I was asleep in only a few minutes. I should point out that I'm an extremely light sleeper. Like very light. You almost have to be in this job. Constantly resting in sketchy roadside areas trains you to develop a sixth sense. If someone messes with your truck while you're out, your career and your life could be at stake. So yeah, being able to wake up to even the faintest sound is sometimes the only thing keeping you safe. Maybe an hour after falling asleep, sure enough, a sound woke me. A faint crunch like footsteps pressing into gravel. Even half asleep, I knew better than to make noise. I peeked through the edge of my window blind, and there they were. Two people crouched near the rear wheels of my trailer. They were huddled down, inspecting the latch like they were figuring out how to open it quietly. They barely made a sound, except one of them flicking a small flashlight back and forth to signal. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew exactly what they were doing. I didn't have a weapon with me, I usually don't, but I was ready to defend my truck and load if it came to that. That's my livelihood. Then I saw one of them pull out what looked like bolt cutters from a small bag. That was it for me. Without hesitation, I slammed my hand down on the horn, blasting the truck's air horn. Their reaction was immediate. Both men jumped like they'd been electrocuted, then bolted into the brush at the side of the lot. Not 10 seconds later, headlights appeared from nowhere. It was the same SUV from earlier, this time speeding in with its lights off before whipping around and vanishing back into the desert. By the time I even considered stepping out of the cab, it was over. Once things calmed down, I called the cops. Honestly, I only wanted to make a report, but they told me to stay put until someone arrived. After a while, two officers showed up and helped inspect the rig. Sure enough, there were fresh pry marks on one of the locks at the back of the trailer, exactly where the men had been working. Luckily, they hadn't managed to break in. The cops told me they'd seen this before, cargo theft. Apparently, it happens along that route more often than most people realize. They figured the SUV had been shadowing me for miles, waiting for a chance to strike. To this day, it remains the most disturbing experience I've ever had on the road. There's truly nothing like driving at night, especially during summer evenings. Imagine this. The warm night air blowing in through the rolled-down windows of a car racing across long stretches of empty highway. That's pretty much how things usually are in the area where I live. Anyway, not many cars use the highway once the sun goes down. No cops either. So I basically have full freedom to drive however I want. And believe me, I don't waste that chance. My dad's Audi RS5 definitely makes it even better in that sense too. Don't get me wrong, I'm not reckless behind the wheel or someone blasting down the road at criminal speeds, but I do like pushing German engineering to its limits every now and then. That particular night was one of those moments. I was just out there joyriding, cruising down the highway without a single worry. Stereo shut off and the passenger seat completely empty. My attention was tuned not to music, but to two different things: the incredible sound of my engine and the rush of the wind slapping against my face. Driving like that is one of the only things that ever makes me feel completely free. I don't know why, but at some point I suddenly had this overwhelming urge to get off the highway and cut through some back roads where I could really test the car's handling. It's the same as when you get a powerful impulse to do something and you can't really explain why, but you just know you won't sleep right if you don't do it. That's exactly the way it hit me. So that's what I did. I got off at the nearest exit and began weaving through a set of back roads, cutting through whatever neighborhood I happened to end up in. The streets were narrow and full of sharp bends, exactly the kind of driving I wanted. I let the car stretch out a little, taking the curves at just enough speed to feel the tires grip and slip. The entire place was completely empty. It was only me, the car, and the road. At least until I caught a flicker of light ahead and slammed my brakes just in time to avoid plowing straight into it. Once I stopped, I finally saw clearly what I had almost run over. It was a shopping cart sitting right in the middle of the road, as if someone had just rolled it out and abandoned it there. The way my headlights bounced off its metal bars must have been what grabbed my eyes and made it look more dramatic than it actually was. Still, it completely rattled me. I mean, it's not every day you see a random shopping cart parked in the dead center of a back road near midnight. Even though I knew better, I shifted the car into park, flicked on my hazards, and stepped out to investigate. I probably should have just kept driving, but my curiosity took over. The whole thing felt so random and out of place that I had this strange need to figure it out. The night air hit me instantly, warm, though buzzing with bugs. The only sound was my engine cooling and making that classic Audi ticking noise. I walked up to the cart, not knowing what I might see inside. Groceries, maybe? No, that was dumb. I scolded myself for even letting such a ridiculous thought cross my mind. I looked into the cart and realized it was totally empty. Nothing but a plain metal shopping cart just sitting in the middle of the street. I lingered there for a few seconds, but once it was clear there was nothing unusual about the cart itself, I turned to walk back to my car. That's when I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Two shadowy figures suddenly bolting out from the farmland beside the road. They were running at full speed straight toward me. My brain froze for a split second, struggling to even process what I was seeing, but in that moment it was pure survival. My only choices were to move fast or die right there. I sprinted back to my car and practically slammed the start button with my fist. The engine roared to life just as the figures reached my window. One of them stopped a few feet short of my car, but the other one ran headlong into the passenger side door, crashing into it with a sickening thud. He didn't even flinch. It was like my car wasn't even there. That's how fast he had been running. He didn't even brace for the impact. Our eyes locked for a split second, and every ounce of confidence I'd just had drained away. I was frozen in place. He glared at me with two bloodshot, beady eyes. His clothes were shredded like he had been tearing through brush or barbed wire, and his hair was a matted, wet mess. His face was smeared with something dark, dirt, or blood, maybe both. His expression was hollow and unsettling. Not really a frown, but not a smile either. I had never felt that terrified in my life. It was beyond bad. Blood was gushing from somewhere on his body, but he didn't even seem to care or notice. He must have realized I wasn't moving because he started tugging at the handle, desperately trying to rip the door open. That was the breaking point for me. I jolted back to my senses, steered the car around the shopping cart, and took off fast from that spot. I wrestled with mixed emotions the entire ride back home. I wasn't just rattled and terrified, but another part of me thought that man was seriously injured and wouldn't get the help he needed. I considered turning back to check if he required help, but in the end I chose not to. Instead, I contacted the police about it while I was still on the road, and they told me they'd send an officer to the location I described to investigate it. When I eventually pulled into my driveway, I parked and stepped out to look over the car. I had to see for myself just how bad the damage had gotten. That's when I realized blood was sprayed across the whole passenger side door, far more than I had imagined. It was streaked on the mirror, smeared over the handle, and even spotted along the rear quarter panel. I also noticed a small dent right in the middle of the door, hardly visible unless you knew where to look. But what disturbed me most was the sheer amount of blood there. It was way more than I ever would have guessed from that short collision. It was an unnatural amount of blood. The following morning, my dad took one look at the car and completely lost his temper. He didn't even give me the chance to explain before he started yelling, calling me reckless, saying I should have never been out driving that late, and ranting about how expensive the dent and paint damage would be to repair. I kept insisting that none of it was my fault, that something out there happened that I couldn't have possibly foreseen, but he refused to listen. To him, all he cared about was his vehicle smeared in blood with a damaged door, and that was all that mattered. For all he cared, I might have struck a deer. Eventually, he did come around to the reality of what happened and even showed some sympathy, but not until after the car was washed and cleaned. And let's just say that was among the last times he ever let me cruise around after dark. I think I can make sense of what really went down. Those individuals, likely homeless, had set a trap to lure some unsuspecting driver out of their vehicle with that shopping cart. That night, I was meant to be their victim. They just hadn't moved quickly or quietly enough to catch me before I managed to escape. I never got an update from the police, but I honestly wasn't expecting to. A part of me tells myself I shouldn't worry, but the thought that hitting someone with my car could have cost them their life that night still haunts me. What I'm about to share is something with no rational explanation. It's the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me or to anyone I know personally. I work late-night shifts at a dive bar located about 35 minutes from my place. It's not exactly something I chose. That's just how it is when you live in a more rural part of the state. There aren't many jobs near home, so you just take whatever's available. The bar itself isn't remarkable, but the job is consistent, and most nights pass without any real excitement. The night it all happened didn't start out any differently. My shift went by without anything unusual taking place. After locking the doors and securing everything, I climbed into my car and began the trip back home. Most of that route is just a bunch of twisting country roads, barely any cars, hardly any lighting, and almost no traffic at all. Honestly, it's just miles of curves winding through forest and farmland. Normally, it's a peaceful drive, and to be honest, I've always kind of enjoyed it for that reason, like a built-in cool-down where I can space out or think back to customers I met at the bar and the interesting talks I might have had with them. Not long after starting the drive, I remember thinking how unusually thick the fog was. I've been down those roads more times than I can remember, but that night, the visibility was worse than anything I'd seen lately. I actually had to ease off the accelerator and go slower because I couldn't see more than a few car lengths ahead. Even switching on my high beams didn't help. It only made the fog brighten and reflect back toward me, almost as if I was steering straight into a wall of white. It started to frustrate me because I knew it would just make the trip longer, and I was already tired. I was about halfway home when I saw it. Through the mist, maybe slightly off to the right-hand side of the road, there appeared a dim yellow blinking light. At first, I assumed it was probably just a roadside reflector or maybe a marker. But as I continued driving, it didn't really seem to get any nearer or further away. It just remained there, blinking in a steady rhythm, almost like it was traveling alongside me, keeping pace from somewhere deeper in the haze. The whole thing felt strange. I couldn't gauge exactly how far away it truly was. It was like the fog was messing with my depth perception. After maybe another minute of traveling with that blinking light floating in the exact same place, I started to feel a strange uneasiness in my stomach. I couldn't even tell you why. Something about it just felt wrong to me. I decided to slow down some, thinking that maybe if I let off the gas, the light would move ahead and I'd get a better idea of what it was, or it would simply continue on and vanish completely so I wouldn't have to think about it anymore. But when I slowed nearly to a crawl, the light didn't change at all. It kept blinking at the exact same rate, still holding the same distance off to the side, like whatever it was had perfectly matched my speed. That's when I really began to feel unsettled. I finally came to a complete stop just to see if it would react the same way. And sure enough, it stayed right there, blinking in the exact same spot with the same steady rhythm. I sat there for a moment trying to figure out what in the world I was looking at and wondering if I should just turn back or keep driving. That's when something shifted. The blinking didn't stop, but the light itself began to grow brighter, similar to a small flame catching a sudden burst of air and flaring up. It wasn't blinking any faster. It was burning more intensely with each flash, as if whatever it was had suddenly become more active. That was all I needed to see. I wasn't going to sit there and wait for it to come closer or for anything stranger to happen. I reached down to put the car in reverse so I could back up and turn around, but that's when I realized the engine wasn't running. I swear it was completely silent. I couldn't figure out how that was even possible. The only way to shut the engine off would be turning the key, but I clearly remembered never doing that. Why on earth would I? At that moment, my hands were trembling, and my hands never tremble. I spend all day pouring drinks. My hands can't shake. While I was frantically trying to restart the engine, I couldn't help but think that whatever was out there beyond my car had something to do with it not starting. I turned the ignition over and over again. The engine was totally lifeless. Meanwhile, that blinking yellow light kept burning brighter and brighter and brighter, almost like it was drawing energy from something. My heart was pounding by then. I had no idea what was going on, and there wasn't another soul around for miles. With nothing else to try, I reached for my phone, thinking maybe I could record what I was seeing, or at least call for help. But as soon as I tapped the screen, nothing happened. Completely black. The phone had shut off. I knew for sure I'd had at least 25% battery left. I had literally checked it at the bar before I locked up, but now it was just as dead as the car's engine. Before I had the chance to react, the light burst into an intense glare, as if a star had detonated right in front of me. The brightness was so overpowering that it was impossible to keep my eyes open. I instinctively raised my arms to shield myself and squeezed my eyes shut for at least 12 seconds, feeling the searing heat of what seemed like an enormous glowing bulb. Then in an instant, it vanished, gone as though it had never existed at all. The fog still hung thick in the air, but whatever had been there was no longer visible. My pulse was still racing, yet I automatically reached for the ignition one last time. This time, the engine roared to life just like normal. I didn't hesitate for even a heartbeat. I finished the drive home with my gaze locked firmly on the road ahead, as though a single glance away might make that dreadful light return. But nothing else occurred that night, and nothing like it has happened since. In fact, I've shared this experience with nearly everyone I know. My family, my friends, even a few of the regulars at the bar. And still, No one has given me an explanation that truly makes sense. And believe me, I've heard every possible theory imaginable.